What is up, you lovely humans? Welcome to episode 43. I'm Jennie O'Connor, and I help multi-passionate creatives slay imposter syndrome so they can grow their influence and self-promote with grace. Let me ask you a question. Are you working a job that brings you no satisfaction while you look over your shoulder at all of the things that you wish you could be doing that truly light you up? Do you dream of somehow combining all of your loves into a venture that makes you money? I've created the Multi-Passionate Master Plan to help you do just that. So if you're committed to making 2022 the year you stop working at a job you hate and finally find the career love of your life, head on over to jennyo'connor.com/masterplan to jump on the wait list. This step is important, you guys, because folks on the wait list will get access to the course and 6 weeks of live coaching for more than 40% off. So if you miss out on being notified when I open the doors, you will miss out on getting all of the value I so lovingly packed into the Multi-Passionate Master Plan for a literal steal. So go jump on the list today. So I want to talk about something near and dear to my heart today. I know a lot of people in my life who really sweat the small stuff. Maybe you can relate to this. My mom once said to me that she always wants to be prepared for the worst case scenario, which was her excuse for being a worrywart. Sorry, Mom, that is a terrible way to live. I can't get behind that one bit. Why not instead hope for the best, and then if something else happens that's not absolutely what you envisioned, you cross that bridge when you come to it. One of my favorite quotes of all time comes from the movie Thank You for Sharing. And in the movie, Tim Robbins the movie is all about recovery, and he is a sponsor in multiple different, like Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. And he says to one of his people he's sponsoring, he says, worry is a meditation on shit. And my head exploded a little bit when he said that, because it is so true. So think about when you meditate, you're attempting to clear your mind of everything, but that is like virtually impossible for human beings and our monkey minds that are always like, especially the moment we try to silence them, they're like chatter, 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 chatter. So what you do generally to try to make your mind calm down is to concentrate on only one thing. So it's essentially thinking about the same thing over and over again. And that thing is typically the sound or the feeling of your breath. Sometimes it's even just counting your breaths is helpful for people. So in any case, it's the same thought repeated in your mind, like in and out, or focusing on the rise and fall of your chest, or if you're breathing into your belly, focus on your belly expanding and then focus on it contracting as you release the air. So then, if you think about it, worrying is you perseverating on the worst case scenario day in and day out. It is literally choosing to be in a stress response, fight or flight or freeze, 24/7. So in a sense, you are meditating on shit. Does that make sense? I have applied this quote to my life ever since I heard it, because it's just true. It just hits the nail on the head. I've also realized, and I talk about this in episode 24, which I will drop the link to below, that we create our realities. This is like a proven fact in neuroscience. The things that we give our thoughts and our emotions to most often are the things that we are going to notice. Since we have a limited capacity for what we can take in, there's too much stimuli in the world around us, way too much for us to take it all in. Our brains pick and choose. So our brains choose the thing that prove our version of reality to be true. So if you constantly reflect on what is bad in your life, on the things that you have to worry about, you will see more of the same. This is facts, y'all. So the good news is there is an alternative to worrying all the time and stressing about outcomes that you can't control. And great news, it's not toxic positivity. It is not only think about unicorns and rainbows day in and day out, get it together. It is instead something far more simple, but also difficult. We'll get into that. It is rather simply to surrender. So there's a lot of talk about this in the online space these days, and I think that a lot of people don't fully understand how it's used in this context, or perhaps they just have a perception of it as something with a negative connotation. So most of us at first blush think of surrender in the context of war, where it means like failing or giving up. And it's true that surrender in that context does mean giving up, but let's be clear here, that's not the same as failing. Failing would be fighting and losing and then everybody's dead, right? Surrendering is often what is in the best interest of the remaining people who are still alive. But, and this is like a fair association, since being prisoner of war might sound little better than being dead in a lot of people's minds, few of us really fully understand the upside of the word surrender. Also, we might tell ourselves that letting go, surrendering or letting go of something is an act of resignation. And a lot of us were taught to like never give up and be determined, fight to the death. So there may be a belief that we aren't measuring up to our own or our family's expectations by loosening our grip on things. But if you look up the actual opposite of surrender, the antonym for it, you will find the word resist. And what is the first quote that comes to mind when you think of the word resist? What you resist persists, which is like basically admonishing you not to fight things because then they will never go away, right? So it's kind of interesting when you think of it from that perspective that if you are not surrendering, you may very well be resisting everything, which really doesn't sound like a terribly joyful existence, at least not to me. For me, though, I consider the opposite of surrender really to be control. So they seem to be on two sides of a spectrum in my head. And control is a lot like resist. If you think about it, I can run around attempting to control the factors in my life, my environment, random circumstances, other people, or I can surrender to what is. I can resist the reality of what is actually true because it's reality, or I can surrender to it. So think of surrender then as an act of acceptance, if that makes it more palatable. It's really what it is. It's the acceptance of what is, of our lives and ourselves as these messy, imperfect things that they are, that include the thousands of elements that are impossible to control. But that's okay. We're okay. In this moment, we are alive and breathing in the air around us. And that in and of itself is a cause for joy. So it is literally an act of humility to surrender to what is. When we do that, when we surrender, we turn down the voice of the ego. And the ego is a 2-year-old. The ego insists that it's always right. The ego places blame on others rather than accepting accountability for our lives. And the ego is overly concerned with seeking approval from other people, which is another thing that doesn't serve us one stinking bit. So if the ego is a child, surrender is an expression of maturity. It is about consciously and actively choosing to get off the insufferable merry-go-round, the hamster wheel of forcing our way through our lives. So rather than an act of resignation, it is an active self-loving choice to embrace our personal freedom and to appreciate the here and now, as it is, with all of its flaws. So how do you know if you need to apply this principle in your own life? Well, if you experience chronic frustration with a situation, something needs to be let go. If somebody triggers you, if a work situation triggers you, if a familial relationship triggers you, then surrender is something to take a look at. Chronic, of course, implies that this is more than a one-off circumstance, and that your resistance to it, your chronic frustration, is showing an unwillingness to accept that this just is what it is. So around this situation, you probably have a lot of demands. Like, things shouldn't be this way. This isn't right. This isn't fair. There is likely a frenetic, forcing, energetic quality to this experience for you. And another way to know if you're sort of caught in this loop is if you're employing fixed thinking. Like, it's a very narrow way of looking at the world. Or if you're speaking in absolutes, that is another sure sign that something's got to give. And let's talk about what we're surrendering to anyway. Like, when we embrace this approach to life, people often use different terms to describe it. Like, I'm surrendering this to the universe, or I'm surrendering this to God. But truly, it can also mean surrendering just to a deeper wisdom inside of ourselves, like our highest self. So sometimes it feels good to trust that the universe has our back, or that what happens to us is God's will. But at the end of the day, surrender simply means that you trust in your body and soul's ability to survive, come what may. You have proven in the past that you can pick yourself up and dust yourself off after whatever curveballs life throws at you, like, aside from a fatal blow, of course. And you can and you will do it again. So that is what you're saying when you surrender. So the reason people struggle with this, outside of not realizing that it's going to help them immensely, is that there are tons of obstacles, like so many reasons we have for thinking this is not a good approach. So let's go over some of those. We invest a ton of effort into going after what we want. And behind that, of course, is a deep longing for something. So for many of us, myself included, when we want something, we're like a dog with a bone. All of our energy is going towards getting that thing. So determination is a great quality. Like, I'm not going to argue with that. But in cases like this, there's a current of energy behind that like causes us to make all sorts of unreasonable demands or have really unmanageable expectations. And underlying all of that is fear. Fear that we will never get what we need, or that we're not supported by the universe or those that we love. Fear that we're like completely in this on our own. We're doing this by ourselves. When we let go, when we stop pushing or pulling or cajoling, or we step away from the thing, we feel the impact of that. We might feel worried that we're giving up on our dreams. So that's the first obstacle. The second obstacle is pride. Pride is sort of how we maintain our ideal self-image, like who we think we need to be in order to be accepted. It's like self-preservation in a way. So pride presents, just like the ego, as a need to be right or to be perfect. I'm looking at all of you perfectionists out there in the world, and I am looking at you with love because I am you, just in recovery. So pride is born out of humiliation and rejection, and its job is to protect our hearts from further pain. So, it's just doing its job. And because surrender requires acknowledging our humanness, warts and all, it's a really humbling process. And it can feel kind of humiliating to someone who has a lot of pride. Also, so many people in the world do not like uncertainty. They don't like change. They don't like not knowing what's going to happen. So this is another really big obstacle. Uncertainty doesn't feel safe. Safety is a basic need. So learning to sit with uncertainty, to discover that it's okay, because it is, after all, the only thing that is certain besides death and taxes. So that's the first step towards addressing that need for emotional safety, is like, reality is that uncertainty is certain. So we can make peace with that, or we can resist, and then it will persist. The last thing is that a lot of us have difficulty dealing with certain emotions. We may deny them, we may stuff them down, and you know who those people are. They're the ones that are prone to like be so even all the time and then have like a massive explosion because they've been forcing their emotions down for so long without expressing them. And then on the flip side of that are the drama queens, are the victims, are the ones who are always making a big old scene about something and massively overreacting. So people in either camp are going to find it difficult to let go of the urge to either avoid their emotions or control their responses to whatever the outcome. And if you feel like you're in one of these camps, I have a really great tool that I'm going to drop the link to in the show notes. The work of Tara Brach. She's a writer. She offers meditations for free on her website. She wrote the book Radical Acceptance, which is an amazing book, and you can read the review of it on my website. Her meditations are really, really good for allowing yourself to feel an emotion. So you may start the beginning of the meditation with an emotion, let's just say anger, inside your body. You will allow it in. You will identify where in your body it is and what it feels like there. And then you will breathe into that space. And there's no judgment. It's just naming it. It's just feeling it. And you will witness it unravel itself. And then you release it. In the end of 20 minutes of a guided meditation, you have developed a whole new coping mechanism for dealing with, like, let's say rage the next time it comes up in your life. Like, game changing, you guys. So check out the links to that below. So if after listening to what needing to surrender looks like, you think that that's something you might want to give a try, how do you do it? Well, remember, surrender is not the same as resignation. So if this is about like a goal that you have, just something positive in your life that you're working towards, it is really important to set up the dominoes for achieving the outcome you want to the best of your ability. This sort of harkens back to like vision boards. Don't just use a glue stick and put a bunch of pictures on a piece of poster board and then like sit back and expect that stuff to happen. Like, you really have to take active steps towards making your goal as likely to happen as possible. But when you have done as much as you possibly can, then it is time to sit back. It is time to trust in your higher self or higher power, whatever that is for you, and say to yourself at that point, what will be, will be. If it's meant to be, it will happen. Because worry is a meditation on shit, right? On the other hand, when we're talking about circumstances or people that you find triggering, it is helpful to use a slightly different practice. So I'm going to outline that for you here. We are not actually troubled or disturbed by what happens to us, but instead by our thoughts about what happens to us. And this is a really interesting thing to absorb into your head. So let me say that again. It's not what happens to us that causes us our angst. It is what we think about what happens. It turns out neuroscientists have discovered that the left hemisphere of our brains is prone to making up stories that do not actually align with the truth in order for us to maintain a semblance of control. So our brains are legit lying to us in an attempt to defend ourselves, I guess, but skewing reality, skewing what actually is, and making it much harder for us to navigate our emotions as we go through life. So it's so important to examine our beliefs about a situation in order to discern what is actually the truth and what is our ego distorting the truth. So the process I'm about to outline is loosely based on Byron Katie's book, Loving What Is, which is a transformational book, you guys. If being triggered by anything, and who isn't? I mean, I can say all this to you guys, but I'm still like a work in progress when it comes to this stuff. This book is transformational in teaching you how to cope. And where I would normally say, like, I love to hold a paper book in my hands, like far more. I mean, I do download audiobooks because I like that I can multitask, like ride a bike and listen to an audiobook. But here's one instance where I really think you should download the audiobook of Loving What Is, because it is set up in an interview format and it's far easier to understand and absorb what is being taught if you can listen to the dialogue between Katie and whomever it is that she's coaching at the time. So loving what is utilizes this process called inquiry. She also calls it the work. And it's going through these various steps every single time something triggers you. So start by writing down who or what is upsetting you and how they should be acting instead, or how the situation should be instead. And remember, there was another episode where I talked about shoulding on yourself, this notion of what should be. I should do this. You should do this. Should is a construct that we create in our own minds. Should is our left brain playing tricks on us. So right there, we're seeing that the reality of what is probably very different from what we think should be. So start with so-and-so should be doing this. Let's say your boyfriend lied to you. My boyfriend shouldn't lie to me. He shouldn't be disrespectful. He should be honest. This isn't how a relationship should look. Ask yourself, is this true? My boyfriend shouldn't lie to me? Well, yeah, of course that's true. He shouldn't. Can I be absolutely certain that it's true? Here, this is sort of a trick question, and what I'm about to say is going to make your brain explode a little bit. Reality is what's true, right? That's what's real. It's reality. So if you say someone shouldn't lie to you, but they have, or they do, that's not reality. Reality is what's true. So they have lied to you, that's what's true. So they shouldn't lie to you, that's actually not true. And here you can start to see how we're unraveling our old thought processes, that this is what should be. But is that true? No, it's not. And if we believe that it is and that things should be a certain way, we are fighting against reality. We are resisting. So the next question to ask yourself, this is like, it takes a minute for that to sink in, and I get that. So just keep going through the next steps, and like eventually you'll get there. How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? My boyfriend shouldn't lie to me. Are you a bitch? Do you completely overreact and you're like embarrassed the next day that you were like such a drama queen? Do you constantly nag him now or check over his shoulder to make sure he's actually doing the things that he says he's going to do? Are you doing crazy stuff like looking in his phone? I mean, just to like run the gamut of possibilities. How are you as a human when you believe that he's acting the wrong way? Probably not something you're terribly proud of. So can you see a reason to drop that thought that he shouldn't lie to you? Maybe you can't. Maybe you're like, no, he shouldn't lie to me. Like, still arguing with reality, but maybe you're stuck on that. So then ask yourself the question instead. This is like the follow-up question. Can you find a stress-free reason to keep the thought? A stress-free reason. You might say, I want to keep that thought because I want to protect myself from being lied to. But that's not a stress-free reason. Is there a reason that makes your life better for holding on to that thought? I'm going to argue no. I'm going to argue that you probably don't like how you act when you think that thought and when you get angry for being lied to. They're probably not a very good partner to your significant other anymore. So there are probably very few, none, stress-free reasons to keep that thought. Then follow that question up with who or what would you be without the thought? Happy? A good partner? Someone who's not constantly, like, you've got your own life. You can't be checking over someone's shoulder all the time, right? Now, I do want to say that remember that this mode of inquiry applies to things that you really can't control. If you are in a relationship with someone who chronically lies or is abusive or something like that, ultimately, and I'm not saying this is easy to do, but you can control whether you stay or go. This method really applies to like family members that you can't divorce, or maybe your significant other lied to you, but it is a one-off situation, only happened this one time, or happens very few and far between, and you don't really have any interest in doing something as drastic as leaving, but you're having a hard time processing the emotions around it. You're having a hard time forgiving and moving on. This applies to situations where surrendering to what is, where embracing the reality of the situation is going to make your life better. Don't stay somewhere where someone is not treating you right and do this work and just say, okay, I'll just deal with it. That's not what I'm suggesting. But if you let's say that you're in a job and you truly can't leave and you don't want to, but you have this coworker who just makes your life hard. Here is where the inquiry and this work becomes very useful, because in situations like that, what other choice do you have but to accept reality and to stop fighting against it? The alternative is to fight. The alternative is to meditate on shit or accept what is and be at peace. So remember that, make smart choices for yourself if you're in a dangerous situation. But for everything else, this method will drastically improve your life. You will become less attached to outcomes. You will be less ego-driven, which I guarantee will make the world a better place. You'll be more relaxed. You'll feel more spontaneous maybe, and you'll find more pleasure in life and stuff to be grateful for. So Laura Maya, who I interviewed in episode 28, has this surrender thing down in spades. And I'm just so, so proud of her. So Laura has a ton of exciting stuff coming up for her this year, which of course means a lot of opportunity for things to not go according to her expectations. So Laura wrote this Instagram post, and I have to read it to you so that maybe it might inspire you to use the same approach to your life. Here's what it says. I'm planning a book launch and tour, knowing that if or when we catch COVID, it will all be called off. We've booked a trip to Nepal and France in April, knowing borders may be slammed shut and flights canceled with no notice. I'm publishing a book, knowing that some people might like it and others will not. So I'm bound to face criticism, judgment, and bad reviews. And I'm preparing for media interviews that kick off from next week, knowing that whenever someone points a microphone or camera at me, I immediately turn into an ironing board. Yes, these are uncertain times, but disappointment and failure are almost guaranteed for me this year. So I've decided to embrace them in the hope that the stress of discomfort and uncertainty will be replaced by the joy of having given it a really good crack anyway. I love this. This is how I choose to live. And I do that by just reminding myself every day what my mentor, Michael Bungay Stanier, says. The secret to a good life is to not mind what happens. So I hope you guys found this useful. I hope that it makes your lives feel a little bit more peaceful. And I really just think that this is an excellent method for learning to love what is. The reality of what is, the beauty of the world around you, this moment, all is good in this moment. So I just want to thank you guys again for listening to today's episode. If you found this content valuable enough to warrant a tip, you can show your appreciation by visiting buymeacoffee.com/Jennie O'Connor. Or you can support the show by rating and reviewing, which I would so love for you to do. And I would also love it if you would come hang out with me on Instagram. I am at Your Creative Fairy Godmother. My goal is to help creative people like you step into the spotlight and make real money from their art. I have created a ton of free resources to help you out with this, and one of these is my Affirmations for Empowerment worksheet, which will help rewire your brain to believe you are already the person you dream of becoming. You can find that at JennieO'Connor.com/affirmations. And while you're there, go sign up to be notified the next time the Multi-Passionate Master Plan goes live. Until next time, y'all, I love your faces, and I want to remind you that you have already won. Now get on out there and do the thing.